Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. Can it get any worse for President Joe Biden and his merry band of Democrats in Congress? The party continues to experience dismal approval ratings as the Republicans are set to sweep the legislature in the upcoming congressional elections. I have with me Liberty Nation's managing editor, Mark Angelides, to break down the numbers. Welcome to the program, Mark.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me on.
Great. So why don't you give us a little bit of a snapshot, just describing how the field is looking for the Democrats at the moment?
Okay, so at the moment, generic congressional ballots give the Republicans a 3-point lead. So there was a Fox one recently, that was a 3-point lead across the board for them. Now, that was within the margin of error. However, you have a Rasmussen poll, which, let's be fair, that they do get a lot of stick, Rasmussen, but they are well known for being quite accurate in what they do. And they reckon it's a close to 8% lead for a congressional generic ballot, which probably means that obviously the House, based on historical trends and present numbers, is going to go to the Republicans. The Senate, it's a little tighter. There are really 5 races that are going to decide where that goes, but the numbers at present suggest that it's probably going to be 1 to 2 seats towards the Republicans, which obviously means that Joe Biden has lost control of both houses.
So speaking of President Biden, now he's insisting, and he's been insisting, that he's going to be seeking a second term. He's going to run again. But another poll from New York Times and Siena show that 64% of Democratic voters would rather see him ride off into the sunset. So do you think he's going to run again? And if so, what are his chances of remaining in office past 2024?
Okay, so there's a few interesting things there, isn't there? There was the poll that said 64% would rather see somebody else run for him. And Joe Biden was confronted with this figure by a reporter. And he says, "You're crazy. 92% would vote for me." Now, that, strictly speaking, that's true. If the ballot were held today, 92% of Democrats would vote for Joe Biden, which really should beg some questions about the state of mind of the Democrat voters at the moment. If they're not willing to support him in a primary, but they would vote for him anyway, it kind of suggests that the motivating factor for many of these voters is a hatred of the GOP, which is probably no way to run politics. But in terms of how his prospects are, there's a few things to look at. There's of course the betting markets, which is always my first go-to. Who's actually putting money down on it? So for Joe being the candidate in 2024, he's a 2-to-1 favorite, followed very closely by Kamala Harris on 3-to-1. And I think Pete Buttigieg he's about an 8-to-1 at the moment. So it's the betting markets say that he's likely to be the nominee if he chooses to run. But then you look at all the newspapers that have been supporting Joe Biden and the Democrats since year one, when Joe Biden was young and the world was black and white. Right. And now they're running these polls on who they rate as who can win in the next election. Now, this is being done despite all saying that Joe Biden's going to run again. He's not going to be challenged, but they're discussing other challenges. And when people start discussing other challenges, it kind of tells you that they're ready to support literally anybody who is not Joe Biden at the moment. Now, in terms of his prospects, if he stands, I think he loses. That's at least that's what the betting markets say. Funny result here is you have for the winner of the 2024 presidential election, the person first on that is Donald Trump. Second place on this 2-man horse race is Ron DeSantis. So both are more likely to be president in 2024, well, come 2025, according to the betting market, than Joe Biden, which is funny that you can come third in a 2-horse race. I always find that strange, but I don't think his prospects are good. However, the Democrats could buoy their prospects by changing their candidate. Whether that happens or not, that's all in Joe Biden's hands, I think.
Yeah, and it is hard to imagine that if he were to run again, that he would get the same level of support that he got in 2020. But in your article in Liberty Nation, you do imply that a red wave in the upcoming congressional elections isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion. What would Democrats have to do to have even a semblance of a chance of retaining at least one chamber of Congress?
Well, I think that it's more down to chance than anything else here. So what you have is people are Democrats and Republicans, independents, they all see what's happened with Joe Biden's track record to date. And I don't feel that they can justify to themselves casting a vote for Joe Biden as things stand at the moment. However, recently we've seen the short price drop in the price of gas. It's about 50 cents thereabouts over the last 30 days. Now, obviously Joe Biden's team has claimed, well, this is thanks to the president's actions, despite telling us for several months that there's nothing the president can do to actually impact the price of gas. But if the price does continue to drop, if inflation starts to drop, which it could do, it's possible, then what you'll end up with is a confluence of events where the Democrat activists and the people within the activist media can go out and say, as you can see, Joe Biden's plan, it's working. Now, whether that's true or not, it has never troubled the activist media, but it's something with which they can say to voters, look, you were right to put your faith in Joe the first time around. Look, he's got us back to this. And if you take him out now, then it's just going to go back to where it was during his midterm period. So yeah, that could be an issue. If things start going better, obviously everybody hopes that things are going better financially because it's hurting people. It's seriously hurting people. But it would give them at least a narrative to suggest that what Joe Biden is doing is something of value. When if you compare it to the rest of his record so far, he doesn't have anything at the moment with which he can approach the voters on, ask them to loan him their vote once more. But if the markets happen to recover, if gas prices go down, if inflation comes down, they will at least have a semi-compelling narrative to warrant asking for the vote again.
Sure. So on the other hand, I mean, even if Democrats don't fix these problems, if they don't get better, how would Republicans, to quote your article, snatch defeat from the jaws of victory?
As Napoleon Bonaparte said, stupidity in politics is not always a drawback, or some words to that effect. The Republicans have a long and storied history of managing to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. It's almost their default position. When everything's going well, they'll do something that will mess up their chances. Now, at the moment, as you know, there's a bit of an internecine warfare happening within the GOP at the moment, as much as it is in the Democrat Party. And you have two diverting forces. Obviously, there's those that support the America First agenda, not necessarily Donald Trump, but the America First agenda. So there are people who have won primaries or been in primary competitions for the GOP who may not have had Trump's endorsement, but have been strong advocates of an America First philosophy. And then, of course, on the other side, you've got the business as usual, or as Donald Trump might refer to them, the rhinos. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening is that there's a pulling competition between them at the moment. Now, it's just my estimation, but I don't think that business as usual Republicans can pick up the undecided voters or the independent voters. I don't think that doing what they've been doing for the last 20 years is going to pull in the people who have decided not to vote for them for the last 20 years. Whereas if people are putting forward a strong America First message, that might pull the independents towards them. However, it's whoever ends up controlling the main narrative. If the establishment Republicans decide that their best option is to do down Donald Trump or to do down those who advocate for the America First movement, then they could quite easily lose the advantages that they've been given by historical trends and by recent polling.
Yeah, so in essence, it's really up to Republican voters to make sure that they don't have the establishment candidates can go on to compete, because I mean, the establishment is business as usual, and you're probably right. I mean, that isn't going to pick up as many votes as people who actually want to affect change. But at Liberty Nation, you know that you and I will be keeping a very close eye on this, and it will be very interesting to see how this turns out. But thank you for joining the program, Mark.
An absolute pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser, or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thank you for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.